Hi, I am Brent Feldman, and we're back with another episode of Mix and Matchbox. Today, I am joined by George Swetlitz. He is the co-founder of RightResponse AI. Hi, George. How are you doing?
How you doing, Brent? Great to be here.
Yeah, definitely. Great to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. And as usual, I have a first question, which is really kind of based on your background and experience and kind of how you got to where you're at. But
Sure.
it's interesting. You started your career at McKinsey. You were the president of Sara Lee in Central Europe. And then you have some tech and healthcare leadership positions that sprinkled in right before getting into Right Response. So how did all of this kind of come together?
Sure. Great question. So, as you said, I've had a long career, and it's really been broken down into two broad strains. One is around consulting, and the other is around operating. And I've rotated back and forth between them. So, as you said, I started at McKinsey and really enjoyed the consulting environment. Being in front of different companies all the time is a real learning experience because you're operating from first principles and you have to decide how you apply those to every company. I've done a lot of consulting over the years, both with large firms and on my own. But then I also, after business school, I decided I wanted to be an operator and joined Sara Lee and ran a factory, and then ended up going to Europe and was asked to lead the startup of a division in Central Europe. And so this was this will date me, but this was in 1990, which was a year and a half after the Berlin Wall fell.
I was thinking of a dynamic time for Central Europe, that's for sure.
Yeah. So it was really a crazy experience being out in Poland, actually living in Warsaw during that time, and helping people understand what is the transition from socialism to capitalism look like for them personally. Yeah. And that was a tremendous experience. And then I left Sara Lee, came back and went back into consulting. And then at that time did a lot of consulting for financial services, probably 6-7 institutions in the area of broad overall performance improvement, working for boards and CEOs. And then after doing that for a while, decided, it's time to get back on the operating side. And so ended up becoming the CEO of a private equity-backed roll-up in audiology. And in that business, ended up bringing together about 220 audiology clinics. And it was really, that's the origin story of Right Response, in the sense that as the CEO of this large clinic group, how do you grow? And you can grow through Facebook, social ads, paid social, and Google paid ads, but you really want to grow because people pick up the phone and call you.
Yeah.
And so understanding how that happens, the dynamics of why people choose the companies they choose, took us down this road of review management, the ecosystem of review and reputation. And at that time, we really weren't able to find a company that did the things that we wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Never really found it. There are the typical players, the Bird Eyes and the Podiums and the Review Trackers and all those guys, and we talked to all of them and we used them, but they never really did what we wanted. And we ended up exiting in 2022, and then ChatGPT came out, 23, and I got my team together and said, I think maybe with AI, we could solve this problem. Mm-hmm. And we did. And we built the company that we wish we would have had when we were running this roll-up. And that's so awesome. That's the story.
Yeah. You're, as a CEO, I'm sure, like that does make you kind of perfectly poised to be able to, see some of the gaps in the marketplace. And then that is fun to be able to say, oh, I wish I had this tool, and then go build it and, sort of realize that dream. Well, actually, you touched on Alpaca Audiology, and that did, as you mentioned, grew to or included 220 plus locations. That's a very significant. So what kind of leadership insight from that experience kind of shaped most how you think about scaling reputation management? Because dealing with all those profiles, all the reviews has to be, and I know this personally as working in a marketing firm, it is a challenge. Like that is it's a stretch, whether you've got centralized marketing or decentralized marketing. But yeah, what did you kind of learn from it?
So I think that the key insight, the key thing that a leader of a multi-location group needs to understand or realize, integrate, is this notion that it's not a task. Review management is not a task. It's an opportunity. It's potentially your most important direct marketing tool. And when you think about it that way, when you say this is an opportunity for me to grow organically, then it sets a whole series of things into motion, a whole set of things. But most reputation management firms talk about it in terms of saving time, right? As if it's a task that you need to save time. Of course, everyone wants to save time. But that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is to win customers, to win in your market. And I spend a lot of time talking to agency leaders as they onboard as an agency. We do white label agency. And so I talk to a lot of agency leaders and getting them to understand that this is a real value added opportunity for them to bring something new and different to their clients is really one of the key insights.
Cool. Yeah. It's very interesting that as I think you're totally right that this is an opportunity to interact with your audience and create, kind of better content, but especially as AI search develops, reviews, responses are incredibly important. And that it seeming like you're fitting in at a point in the marketplace that actually is very necessary, and it's going to become even more so in the very near future too.
Right. There's no one closer to the bottom of the funnel than someone who is actually reading your reviews. Right? They're reading your reviews because they're at the bottom of the funnel. They did some research. They found they're trying to decide, who am I going to call? And so if you're not engaged in that conversation, when that prospective client is there, it's a huge miss. It's an unforced error.
Yeah.
And that's what we try to teach our customers.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting. Not that he invented ratings or reviews, but I think, Bezos knew within Amazon that ratings and reviews, were even critical. And there was so much data that came out of that, from understanding that even things with lower reviews versus no reviews actually perform better on the platform. And so I think you're totally right. And I love that actual piece of, kind of advice or insight that essentially people are at the bottom of the funnel when they're reading reviews, because I think that is so true. That is right before the decision, kind of making that purchase choice that they're basically they're the closest they could be to the bottom of the funnel.
Right. So I think what happens is people think about review response as just something that I have to do because somebody wrote a review. And the way we think about it at RightResponse is the review and the response are for two completely different audiences. Right. The review is for Google. Right. That's why you collect reviews. You collect reviews for Google. Because the fact that you have reviews, and a lot of reviews, is a proxy for popularity. So if you want to be high on the map pack, you have to have reviews. And we have a lot of tools that help you understand what your competitors are doing and what do you need to do in order to win versus your competitors, all of those things. But that's why you collect reviews. Responses are not for Google. Responses are for the people reading the reviews. They're not even for the person who wrote the review. They're for everybody else who's reading about your business from somebody else's perspective, and you want to talk to them as if you were there.
Yeah.
And that's the purpose of the review response. So every piece of this is for a different element. And that's what I was saying before about, but once you start to think about this not as a task, but as an opportunity, then you start saying, well, how do I take advantage of that? What are the different components, and how do I think about engaging in that review ecosystem?
Definitely. Yeah, cool. Well, sorry, I'll try to get back to the questions. I can't help but dig deeper here. But one of the things that we're focusing on in terms of industry is definitely banks and credit unions. And I think that as a whole, they are usually they live and die by trust. How can AI-driven review strategies actually build trust rather than potentially undermining it?
So the first question is, why does AI undermine trust? And so AI undermines trust because in the absence of personalizing information, it spits back some generic answer based on what everyone else has written, in the last whatever period of time. And so AI by itself is not necessarily helpful. AI is helpful if you're able to extend your brand. Right? So think about if you're a bank or a credit union, and there are all sorts of things that you think make your credit union or bank special. Right? It's products, it's services, it's the way you engage with customers, it's whatever you decided as a marketing organization makes you special. Okay. So you've determined that. Now, the question is, how do you at scale get the word out? So if you think about a review and you're responding to these reviews manually, you have a room full of people who are typing incessantly, trying to write these reviews. But now you have to teach them about your brand, and you have to teach them about all these advantages, and you have to teach them what to say because they don't know. Right? And that's difficult. That's what we tried to do at Alpaca when we were through it to 220 locations. How do we get the word out? Well, it was a mess because you train people, they don't say the right thing, they say the wrong thing, they don't understand. It's humans. AI is really good at understanding relevance. And so when we talk at RightResponse, and we're different than everybody else, at RightResponse, when we talk about highly customized review responses, what do we mean? We mean that and we help through AI, but we build a set of facts about the business that reflect your brand, that reflect your marketing approach. And so if somebody says something that's relevant to the way that you're treated by a commercial banking rep, then you could say, if somebody talks about this, add that we do this. Right? So it's very relevant to your brand. You're telling AI how to respond to that type of question at scale.
Yeah.
Now, you still want to have a human reviewing it, but they don't have to think about what are all the points that were made in that review and how do I respond to each one. AI is great at that. So AI helps you scale your brand voice, your marketing voice. And that's the difference. AI on its own can make you sound terrible. AI that's trained on your brand makes you sound great. And that's what we do at RightResponse, is we fuse those things together.
That's awesome. Well, you've talked about another element too, which is interesting, which is personalization. And and as those being a kind of strategic advantage, making sure that they're actually really tailored messages. What would personalization at scale actually look like for let's say a regional or national financial institution?
So there are certain things that people say that are applicable to the entire organization. Right? the way, you know, the way the products you have and why they're special or whatever it is. Then there are certain things that are local. So you have a branch that's in a downtown area in a town, and it's difficult to get parking out front. And there's a lot of reviews that say I had a hard time getting parking, and that was very frustrating because I needed to get a deposit, blah, 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 all these things. So you can create facts about your business that are global, that apply to all locations, and you can create facts that are hyper local to a single branch. And who knows that but the branch manager? The branch manager knows those things and can create those facts for that branch. So when somebody says, I had a hard time finding parking, AI says, hey, next time you come, I'm sorry about that, but next time you come, we have additional parking in the back of the building. And you enter off of Beach Street, and there are 47 spaces and 2 accessible spaces. And sorry about what happened. That is a response, right? That's personalization at scale.
That's cool. I think that's really helpful for contextualizing personalization for people, because I feel like the automatic inclination, I think, is that it's going to be personalization down to the individual, and it doesn't have to get there, you know. And you're right to, like, you know, center on like locality. That could be helpful. There's lots of different relevant points that could occur around that individual that don't necessarily mean you're targeting, you know, X person exactly, but it's the things that are relevant to them that makes it feel more personal, not just, you know, thank you, we generally have parking at our locations, you know. And that can be really helpful for just people to picture what personalization actually looks like.
More people read reviews than visit websites. So if you know, every bank, every company spends a fortune on their website, but more people are going to and reading reviews than going to the website. And so what that means is that you have to bring the website to them. All the things that you talked about on your website about why you're the best, you have to bring that to them when they're engaging. And so, and remember we talked about before about how the response is not for the person. It's for everybody. So you have a elderly couple that reads about the credit union, says, oh, but I can't get parking there. And so I'm not going to go there because I can't walk. Well, when it says the parking's in the back and there's accessible spaces, they're like, oh, there is parking. I can go there. And more than that, they're actually engaging with those reviews. This sounds like a friendly place. I'm going to go there. And it's not fake. And there's still, you know, most of our clients like skim the responses. They have the ability to automate some of them, and they don't necessarily have 5-star review. Do you really have to look at it? A response for a review that doesn't have any text. Do you really have to look at it? So some things you can just post, but most of our clients will review or read those responses before they post them to make sure. So it's not fake. It's very real, and it's actually better. It's a better way of bringing your brand to customers than these silly AI responders that just parrot back exactly what's in the review. You know, it used to be templates, right? It used to be you'd create a response template.
Yeah.
And so every third response looked exactly the same.
Thank you for reaching out, you know.
And honestly, most banks and credit unions still do that.
Yeah.
It's templates. They have this negative thing about AI, which, you know, generic AI isn't necessarily, I think, a benefit to anybody. But they're not at the cutting edge. You know, they're not really engaging in the opportunity.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, you know, in general, I don't know if you agree with this sentiment, but I think you might. But ratings alone, they don't tell the full story necessarily. And what would you say, in your opinion, are maybe some of the more overlooked hidden insights inside of that customer sentiment data, and how should these leaders act upon that information they receive from this platform? Because it's not just about the sort of the 5-star review with no text. People are putting in deep thoughts and feelings sometimes into these reviews. So what is the subtext that can be gleaned from all of that?
Yeah, it's a very interesting problem, because reviews are so complicated. They're so short, but they're so complicated. The teller was great, but the office was dirty. I mean, it's just, is this a positive review or a negative review? And so when you look at a rating, the rating is really an average of sub-ratings, if you think about it. But Google doesn't do sub-ratings, right? You give a star on the overall. And so what we do is we create topics. So when someone signs up, we create a set of topics. This topic might be for a bank. It might be products and services. It might be service level, how you engaged. It might be hours and ease of use, things like that. Might be kind of categories, and then within that there are specific topics. And every large organization, banks, credit unions, they all have scorecards. They all have a way of thinking about their business. They measure themselves against certain things, and they can take those exact things and they can put them into our topic framework. And then what happens is, when a review comes in, we essentially look at that review phrase by phrase, and we say, is this review relevant to this business? Because sometimes someone might say, I was down the street at Fifth Third and it was horrible. Well, that's not relevant. That's not a negative sentiment around this business. So we look at that and say, no, that doesn't have anything to do with it, and we throw it out. And so we look at every phrase and we say, is this relevant to the business? If it's relevant to the business, what topic is it associated with? And then we assess whether it's positive or negative and the strength. Now, you get a lot of reviews, you roll all of that up, and you can then say, well, you might have had a 4.7, but it's really a 5 on products, but a 4 on service level. And so you can visually see that. And then not only can you see that, but you can compare locations. So you might have 2 different branches that are both 4.7, but they could be 4.7s for very different reasons. And you can just go to that branch manager and say, you're a 4.7, you should be 5. But you're better off going to the branch manager saying you're a 4.7 because you got an issue with your tellers.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the insights. Right. So when we talked before about every element of the review ecosystem has a different purpose, the purpose of analyzing the unstructured data in reviews is so that you can operationalize it. You have someone who's responsible for the operations of the branch.
Yeah.
That's a job. And they can use the assistance of understanding where every particular location is excelling and where every location could use some help.
Yeah, definitely. That's cool. And I guess probably the primary way people may be getting this feedback, where the people see the forum to engage with the brand, is really the review section sometimes. They're not always being served a survey, or if it does come to their inbox, is it just another thing that gets, deleted pretty quickly. But, reviews get engaged with so quick. So it's I guess, not just important, but imperative that they start peeling out this data and sussing out what is exactly, going right and going wrong with the organization based on some of these things that can be real insights. Yeah.
Right. Well, there's nothing better than disaggregating real written reviews that people wrote and making sense of it. You send a survey, you've teed up the categories, you've teed up the questions. People, they don't necessarily, they start doing it. They didn't realize there were 20 questions. They thought maybe there'd be 3. They're zooming through it to get done. So there's some potential issues with surveys.
Mm-hmm.
But there's fewer issues with reviews. People wrote what they wanted to write, and you're just structuring that unstructured data.
Yeah.
And gleaning the insights. And it's a very, there's a lot of truth in those reviews.
Absolutely. Ooh, well, actually, as you touched on, disaggregating ratings, I think I'll jump to this one, which is like, as AI is kind of getting, smarter at disaggregating, the ratings and surfacing more kind of like that nuanced sentiment. How do you see CMOs leveraging this information, not now, but in 5 years from now? Because, we're at a point where I know you mentioned, like ChatGPT came out and you're finally able to realize, making this product. But as you see AI developing, because I'm sure you have, even from when you started this product to where it is now, what do you see either the information, being of higher quality, of more sort of like nuanced, sort of like information coming to the service, or creating some sort of like different insight altogether? And how will it be potentially leveraged?
Yeah, I think and where we're a small company, there's only so many things we can do at one time.
Sure.
But in our roadmap of where we want to go, it's really taking those insights that we develop that are now in tabular format and providing it back to a manager of a location in a very simple way to say, hey, this is what's going on. These are the trends. This is where you stand against your peers. Making it very actionable.
Cool.
So that nobody has to ever, our objective eventually is that nobody ever has to go into our system and set it up. We're working on AI onboarding so that when you sign up to our platform, it just AI asks you questions, has a conversation with you, and then sets all the settings in the background. The same thing would be on the output. You never have to go in to analyze. It does all of that for you and gets it to you. And the problem is it's all around cost.
Mm-hmm.
It's the quality of the LLM, the cost of the LLM. And as prices continue to go down, you reach a certain point at which somebody says, you know what, I'm willing to pay for that. And so that's what I see, is that over time, as costs hopefully continue to decline and quality continues to increase, that you reach a point at which people say the quality of these outputs is such that I'm willing to pay for them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. All right. Well, and you actually already kind of answered one of the future questions here too, which is like by your roadmap. It does seem like, analyzing some of these, larger trends. But actually what it just made me realize, maybe what I can kind of tack on there too, or wonder if this is like, maybe in the forecast or an idea of future opportunity and possibility, is what is that data mean on a more macro level to the market in general? This is on a organization by organization level that you're able to provide trends, insights, but theoretically, the more that you concentrate within an industry, that can give you an even bigger, broader picture of like, oh, where are people running into challenges with like, local organizations, or, how are they, in sort of responding to these things in mass? But do you see that as being, trends forecasting that you'll be able to do in the future as well?
Yeah. So one way that I like to think about that is, and this goes back to my alpaca days. Every business exists in its own competitive environment, right? And so I could have two clinics that on paper looked exactly the same, but one was excelling and the other was failing. And the one that was excelling was because they were the best in their market, doing what they were doing. And the other one had competitors that were just doing a better job than we were. So on our internal measurements, they were the same, but performance-wise, they were very different because of the local competitive environment. And the same thing is true of banks and credit unions. You might be in a market where there's a lot of credit union competitors and they're really good. And so it's a harder competitive environment from a different branch somewhere else that's in a market where there's not as many or they're not as good. And so we have a section called competitor analysis where you can understand, you can understand where you rank, and then you can learn about your competitors and what are they excelling. You can do the sentiment analysis on their reviews, so you can learn what people are saying. So you can start to understand, why is it that we're performing this way in this market?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a different angle. It's competitor awareness that is a second level derivative of reputation management.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the next level. And again, we have some customers that use it, most don't, because you still have to work at it and think about it. And one of the things I've learned building this business is that people don't want to do that. People want things done for them. And so that won't really take off until we do all the heavy, we do a lot of heavy lifting, but not enough. So we need to do more heavy lifting. But we have a lot of agencies, for example, that before they go on a pitch, they'll go in and they'll use those tools to understand the client that they're pitching and the competitors. And they'll go in there with a better understanding of the competitive environment than the company has, using these tools. Just using the information that's out there, people's reviews. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's amazing. That is cool. Well, actually, all right, just really quick, gonna hop back into, sort of banks and credit unions, only
Sure.
because I feel like there's a topic that I'd really, love your idea or insight into, especially because of, you had mentioned, kind of like these AI responses and potentially how they're getting to people. But in definitely industries where maybe regulators more heavily scrutinize communication, how can organizations, balance both the compliance need as well as the need for authenticity in their communication with customers via the response?
That's why I think it's important that, especially in the regulatory environments, that people review before publishing. So it's really a way of extending the brand through the response, but then making sure what you're writing is actually true. Right?
Yeah.
And so to me, it's in these highly regulated environments, you just have you're able to actually spend less time and get better content, but there needs to be a review layer.
Yeah.
So, for example, in the medical side, we have a PHI tracker,
Mm-hmm.
and they can turn that on. And what it does is it reads the review and has a definition of what PHI is. And then it identifies all the instances of PHI, alerts you that there's PHI in that review, and then makes sure that none of that PHI shows up in the response. So there's a series of AI agents working in the background to do that for you. Right? And similar things could be done on the banking side around personal information and things like that. And so, there are always ways to use AI around regulation, around compliance, to help you, do things in the right way and not get yourself in trouble.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you did mention earlier about how more people want more things done for them. And I know that to be the case as well. Because the developments in AI, hopefully maybe at a point in time, I don't know if you see this as being possible, but it being explicitly trained on all the compliance, regulation necessities, for whatever particular industry, and then being able to apply those facets to its response in general. I am completely with you on the human response, or at least review being, sort of best before publishing. But, do you see that as a future potential?
I think it's just a question of having a client that wants to spend the time to build that compliance component.
Yeah.
That's what we did my background was on the medical side anyway. So when we built it, we knew we would do a lot of healthcare related things. And so we built the PHI kind of in a very rigorous way. We would just need the same level of intensity of thought in that area to build it for banks and credit unions.
Cool. Well, that's helpful. Thank you. All right. I guess um, knowing that banks and credit unions are also leveraging, maybe internal satisfaction surveys as well, potentially NPS, Net Promoter Score data. Is this something that you feel like in the future, those things will always theoretically hold importance or value? Do you see a point in the future where reviews that they're getting through other resources or mediums may actually be more important than what they see through those surveys? Or do you see a point where actually putting that data all together in a central resource of, hey, we're seeing this on internal surveys, Net Promoter Scores, here's the review data, let's put it all together and see what the bigger picture is? Do you see, either one outweighing the other, or the larger aggregation of all of this data creating a more thorough picture of what people could take data away from?
Yeah, so I think it's the aggregation. I think that, so we do some of that today. So for example, if someone has surveys with unstructured text, we can incorporate that, and it's just another source. Google's a source, Yelp's a source, Better Business Bureau is a source, Trustpilot's a source, your own survey is a source, a chat log is a source. We analyze chats for clients. They have, if someone goes on the website, does a chat, that's all recorded, and then we get a copy of that and we analyze it. A lot of great data. What's going wrong? What's going right? So it's really, I think the future is bringing all of these together and trying to understand, why am I seeing certain issues in this source versus another source? What's understanding that whole universe of customer data or customer information? To me, that's the future. It's bringing it in together into one platform.
That's great. Yeah. Do you think that it's just Yelp people are unhappy in general? And I'm kidding.
Well, there's a certain kind of person that signs up to the Yelp experience, right? And it's true. We analyzed, it's on our website, we analyzed 100,000 restaurant reviews, and we looked at Google versus Yelp versus DoorDash versus, and it's just very different what people talk about.
Mm-hmm.
The DoorDash people are all about, what was the food like when it got to my house, right? So it's just, they're all a little different.
Yeah.
And you have to understand that.
Yeah.
When you're thinking about your business.
That's actually great insight for people also to concentrate, not only maybe like their energy on, it's getting reviews from a particular platform, but also then curating what response is actually, necessary for a particular platform too, because that could mean a lot to that, that business at the end of the day.
Right.
Yeah.
100%.
Cool. Well, all right. Last question for you. You've worked in consumer goods, healthcare, and now tech. If you were advising, a CEO on reputation in the AI era, what would be your single piece of advice?
My single piece of advice would be, take it seriously, because it could be your biggest source of growth.
Cool. Great.
That's, you get yourself to the top of the map pack and you engage with those customers that are reading the reviews, your organic growth is going to, skyrocket.
That's amazing. And the organic growth is so important. I know that ads matter, other things matter out there, but I'm a firm believer in that organic growth that is just it's critical.
Yeah, it really is. It's in the long run, it's so cheap compared to paying for clicks.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's great. I will say, George, you've had some fantastic information on here. I not only appreciate that, it sounds like you've got a great platform, and I really appreciate your thoughts and your insights, though, as well. Actually, where could people either, learn more about you, the platform in general? Where would you send people to go?
Yeah, the easiest place to go is RightResponseAI.com.
Cool.
Everything is self-serve on our platform. For larger customers, you have the ability to book a call, and we talk to you and help people understand larger implications. But our large customers self-schedule meetings, and our small customers just sign up. So it's a really easy process. We try to make it easy, at least. That's what our reviews tell us.
There you go. Yeah, and exactly. And if you weren't reading your reviews, that would be a little confusing. Oh my gosh. Well, that's amazing. Again, thank you so much for being on the podcast. And yeah, I appreciate all these great responses.
Yeah, great. It was a lot of fun. Nice talking to you.
Thanks. Well, this has been another episode of Mix and Matchbox. I am your host, Brent Feldman. We'll be back soon with more content. Please like and subscribe. Thanks.